But in the meantime, my thoughts go out to the children of Tennessee, because the legislature has apparently succumbed to pressure from the Republican Party. The Tennessee Department of Health has halted all vaccine outreach to kids, not just for COVID-19, but for all diseases. And staff have been ordered to remove the agency logo from any documents providing vaccine info to the public, as per internal documents. So this is going to be a legacy of Trump contrarianism, that the Republican Party, in order to differentiate themselves from the Democrats, have made their stand an anti-vaccine position, to characterize themselves as for liberty and freedom and individual choice, free of state-sponsored information about vaccines and about the benefit to public health. So this a journalist, Lydia Polgreen, who is now running Spotify's Gimlet Media and previously was the editor-in-chief of Huffington Post. She writes that she once watched a child die of measles in eastern Congo, where civil war made vaccination all but impossible for millions of children. It is unthinkable that anyone would choose even the slightest risk of that gruesome death for their child. But of course, many mothers now and fathers are now choosing to expose not only their own child, but to all children in the United States a higher risk of contracting measles, because measles outbreaks become more possible and more likely when herd immunity falls below a certain rate. So the people that position themselves as adamantly anti-vaccine and who hype themselves into a frenzy that vaccination is actually the cause of all disease rather than the prevention of multiple diseases, they lie. They lie, and they make it very difficult for herd immunity achieved through vaccination to be a part of the public health landscape. Now, there are always some people who are too young to be vaccinated. There's always a subset of the population that's immunocompromised and that can maybe receive a vaccine, but it won't work. It won't prompt their immune system to generate adequate levels of antibodies. When you measles is so highly contagious that if the vaccination level falls below a quite high percentage point, those outbreaks become not only more likely, but they happen and they kill children. Some children die from measles-related encephalitis, swelling of the brain. There's a host of vaccine-preventable diseases that will now increase in frequency in Tennessee because the Tennessee Department of Health has succumbed to the Republican Party's Trump-related vaccine contrarianism. And Trump tweeted in a way that was negative about vaccines prior to becoming president. When he was president, he decided that was one path to glory. He correctly surmised that he couldn't win heroic, defiant hero status just merely by containing the virus. So he only felt the appeal of something where he could win plaudits, something where the measures for success would be tick, tick, vaccines came about. So he did help expedite some funding for some vaccines. Pfizer didn't take the Operation Warp Speed funding, but some other companies did. And when he realized he'd lost the election and wasn't going to get glory for a vaccine rollout, that Biden would be in charge of administering and delivering that vaccine. And it wasn't just going to be an election-winning point for him to say, I delivered the American people super warp speed vaccinations from scientists. Then he didn't care about what happened to the American people. And today, a contention from Michael Wolff's new book, Landslide, The Dying Days of the Trump Presidency, he makes the assertion that Trump ultimately was hoping to postpone the election, feeling that there would be enough community transmission present at the time of early November for him to say, let's delay the election. So all of the efforts that people, individuals, organizations put in to safeguarding American democracy, to ensuring that the election went ahead, even in a pandemic, just through use of mail-in votes and ways to circumvent the need to be present with other people in indoor settings that would have facilitated additional viral transmission. All of those efforts paid off to secure American democracy, and actually hold that election in what we now know is direct opposition to Trump's hopes and dreams to postpone the election because of a disease that he had a pandemicidally negligent response to. Kim, hello to people. I haven't acknowledged your presence. Let's have a look. We've got Molly, we've got Kim, we've got Brian Lee. If Greg Abbott does have Dems who left Texas arrested, hell will be paid. It's not right. Yes, Texas Governor Greg Abbott is certainly doing a lot of posturing about how he will arrest the Texas Democrats who left the state in protest against the electorate shrinking legislation that he wants to have a special, or has for the second time proposed a special session of the Texan state legislature to pass. And they're drawing attention to how fundamentally anti-democratic it is with their unprecedented actions of leaving the state. So that's what's needed, that kind of step up that says this is unprecedented. The attacks on democracy are unprecedented, and they're supported by the fact that Biden has made a powerful speech yesterday, also highlighting how unprecedented the current Republican attacks on democracy are. And he asked that important question, have they no shame? Some of them don't have shame. And it's important for us not to overindulge in cynicism, to say no Republicans ever have any shame, because some of the ways in which democracy was saved, and democracy hung by a thread last year and continues to dangle by threads to a degree in the United States, we owe to the conscience of some Republican elected officials, who the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and other people who held the line against Trump's efforts to intimidate and coerce them into overturning their state's election results in his favor, to find, as per his request, 11,790 extra votes for Trump in order to overturn Biden's victory in the state. What was that state? That was Georgia. The Georgian state Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, yes. And Trump also tried it on with Arizona's Secretary of State. He had meetings with state Republican elected representatives from Michigan, etc. So yes, the shame of our political opponents is something we rely on. This chap, blah, blah. Look, you boring little troll. You can repeat. He says, mail-in votes are potential fraud. Voters should register and vote in person. Now, the problem with that trolley piece of disinformation is that multiple American states have used entirely mail-in voting for all of their voting for some years now, and it hasn't been a problem. It's only a problem because that was how Trump sought to steal the election in 2020, by disparaging mail-in voting, by ensuring Republican voters used in-person voting, preferentially speaking, even though there was a pandemic raging at that moment in time, so that he could use his corrupt appointee to the position of Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, to dismantle millions of dollars worth of mail sorting machines and delay the delivery of mail-in votes to election vote sorting centers, and then claim, oh, those votes didn't make it in time. Looks like they can't be counted. Looks like all those Biden skewed votes just they're not right. We can't count them. Stop the vote. Trump won. So yes, trolls who are either consciously or unconsciously steeped in Trump propaganda. When I say Trump propaganda, he's not isolated. He's part of a machine to deceive the American people through the operations of the Rupert Murdoch propaganda machine, Fox News, Sean Hannity, Fox, Rush Limbaugh when he was alive, all of the people that have marinated the brains of multiple Americans, millions of Americans, in fact, in an inadequate worldview. Inadequate's probably a good word. It's a very inadequate and inaccurate worldview to say they are against us. Those migrants are taking things from us. Those black people are taking things from us. They should leave. They're not discriminated against. We're the true Americans. Our labor built this country. Nonsense. And I heard a comedian put it well. He said, I think his name was D.L. Hewley. He was on a Netflix show called The Fix. I saw it last night. He said, you didn't build this country, you supervised. Yes, supervisors trying to take all the credit and claim that they are due all the recompense exclusively when the coerced labor of forcibly enslaved people is what built America's initial wave of industrialized wave of prosperity, including, yes, the initial wave of American geopolitical influence. But second wave American prosperity and geopolitical influence contingent on that wealth is a product of America's ability to attract migrants. So the original wealth of the United States generated by the coerced labor of enslaved human beings, viciously mistreated human beings, and sanctimoniously derided human beings because white people who were oppressing others confected a whole raft of religious justification, religious theorizing to justify their unethical, corrupt, inhumane behavior and treatment towards the differently melanated, i.e., non-white people, the non-white people they chose to enslave and exploit. So we can block the bad person. There we go. We don't have to listen to that because there is no redemptive potential with someone at this stage. Maybe he can encounter it somewhere else, but here, where he has the disruptive capacity to interrupt the broadcast with lies, I don't have to include that on my platform. It's part of the First Amendment that the government can't interfere with you speaking your mind, whereas on a private platform, there is no such constitutionally protected right to keep trolling your truth. Brian says he will do everything he can to make sure Abbott is voted out. Yes. Wow, Molly says she had chickenpox at 26 and almost died because Canada's Indian Health Department didn't vaccinate children. Okay, so there was no program to vaccinate Indigenous children. And there's 10 children on life support in Mississippi, 10 children. Oh, somebody gave me a Super Heart Award. Thank you, Jane. Oh, Jane's there again. Hi, I remember you. Better World says every Republican that voted not to impeach should do jail time, and says keep speaking truth to power. It would be nice if there was jail time for failing to impeach Trump the first time or the second time, but jail, I'm not aware anyway of any laws at a federal or state level that require people to make good decisions. If there's evidence that they behaved corruptly, it's tricky. I'll leave that to the legal minds. In the meantime, what I might do is search for something, because Blair Erskine did a satirical piece in which she pretends to be a representative from Governor Abbott's office. Here we go. She's already had 800,000 views, because satire is a very potent way to spread commentary on a situation.
That's right. And thank you so much for having us. If we could say one thing to the Texas Democrats right now, we would probably say, y'all are being sneaky now. Come on back to Texas now. Okay, we got work to do. Because, you know, like Governor Abbott always says, winners never quit, and Texans aren't when Texas doesn't quit. And so, unless their wives or their daughters have, requested a vacation in Washington, D.C., like, they shouldn't be there. And so we're just kind of like, why are y'all there? You know, that's kind of our view on it. And, here's the thing. Our bill is pretty straightforward. Okay, all we want to do is end drive-through voting, end extended hours for early voting, end waiting in the car while your friend is doing their voting, end drinking water while voting, and we want to end voting. And so it's not complicated. Listen, where there's a will, there's a way. And if your name is Will, you're probably a white man, and there's going to be a way for you to vote. So we're confused about where the concern is coming from. Governor Abbott always says, why can't we do it like they do it at medieval times, and just cheer the loudest if we want the yellow knot to win, because they really haven't figured out over there. And
so, yes, this lady is great. She's a comedian. I think she's self-started her own career on Twitter, and her videos are so popular and well-received amongst discerning Americans that, yes, she has hopefully a great future ahead of her. Oh, wow, she's done a video on Amazon as well. Shall we hear? It's going to be about Jeff Bezos.
Here at Amazon, we would like to congratulate Sir Richard Branson on his historic journey to space, and remind everyone that our own space daddy, Jeffrey Bezos, will be taking a historic journey of his own very soon. Mr. Bezos would like to point out that this is not a space race, so stop saying that Sir Richard Branson won the space race, because there wasn't a race. Because if there was a race, Jeff would have won, because he is slick and hairless and not of this world. But it's not a race. I remember when Mr. Bezos first told us he was going to space, and we were like, space? And he was like, well, not actually space, just like, almost to space. And we were like, so like the sky? And then he was like, yeah, like the sky, but like the top of the sky. Like, I can touch it, I'm a big boy. And we were like, we know you're a big boy. Jeffrey, you're doing so good. So congratulations, Mr. Bezos, on your trip to the sky, to the top of the sky. We've always told you you can do anything you want, because you make us tell you that, because too much money. Here at Amazon, we would like to congratulate.
That's a nice skewering of someone with a lot of money. She's kind of illustrative of the undertaxed nature of the most wealthy people in the world, that they could be helping save humanity from some of the really pressing existential problems that we face. Forever chemicals that help give us waterproof clothes so that we can go out into the rain and not get soaked. Those are poisoning our waterways. We're all eating about a credit card sized amount of plastic each month. The temperatures are increasing, leading to increasingly severe and frequent weather events, which is going to make insurance. Yeah, Mummy's broadcasting, but thank you, Daddy. I'm so lucky to have my husband at home. It's not going to last for much longer, because once we move to the United States, he's going to have to work in person, because the United States has done well with their vaccination rollout. So the only reason he's working from home at the moment is because work is in the United States and we're not there yet. So it's too far for him to commute. Soon it won't be. Soon it won't be, America, and I will be amongst you, which is gratifying. I've worked for 3 years to try and defeat what's essentially the forces of darkness that was overtaking American politics, that had overtaken American politics. It was a victory for Vladimir Putin and the forces of disinformation, and the unofficial coalition between super powerful, super potent, uber wealthy people: Rupert Murdoch, Vladimir Putin, Robert Mercer, Charles and David Koch. Who's left alive? Charles Koch. the kind of people that have sought to nefariously shunt democracy into a model of their choosing, that have taken advantage of Trump's fascist tendencies, fascistic ability to manipulate and groom people into a frenzy of gratified racist perspectives. Because turns out it's a very powerful human motivator when you agree with people and their worst ideas, and then you expand on them. You validate them, you grow them, and you use them. And then you grift on them perpetually for money. Because Trump's still grifting from his devoted base for donations, to fight in his lawsuit against Twitter and Facebook for daring to say, dude, you blatantly incited an insurrection using our platforms. We're private companies, and that's against our terms of service. And we're finally going to police our own terms of service. Jane says, are you coming soon? To which I say, yes. It's a 7-day countdown for me now to move to Boston. Kim says, we simply must all meet up and have a symposium to save America, only half joking. We should have symposiums all across America so that even if all of us can't meet in the one place, we can have like a town hall where we try and talk about solutions. That reminds me, I should move on to all of the stuff that has to be covered. So much. So yes, the Texas governor wants to arrest the Democrats. The Senate Democrats have agreed on a $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation bill, including expansion of Medicare, which is awesome. And the expansion of Medicare is a very effective way to bring everyone in America on board with access to health insurance and healthcare. So in response to that comment about the Senate Democrats, someone says West Virginia in 5 years, using a commonly used futuristic photograph showing someone walking a robot dog in a space car vision of the future, i.e. implying that West Virginia will get the lion's share of fundraising in an effort to persuade Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia to stop upholding the goddamn racist filibuster, which is not just racist, it is democracy defeating filibuster. It is holding up the mandate of the elected Democrats who've gained the White House, the Senate, the House in 2018, and want to be able to enact their own agenda, but are still subject to the Republican agenda of obstructing everything that's good for Americans, using a misbegotten argument that money and help is bad for America and makes it soft. And that's just really the emotional answer to an older generation's fears that younger people have it too good and that they're too soft. And that's why you have to vote for Republicans. Otherwise, you get an indulgent, emotional, soppy, weak nation. And everybody's got to be tough. And therefore, you shouldn't have social safety nets, and you shouldn't have infrastructure, and you shouldn't believe in science or climate change, because that's just going to encourage those young people to pretend that they have it hard. They do have it hard. They have a lot of fears that younger people in previous generations didn't have to contend with. A lot of, oh, pumpkins, do you need mommy? All right. Here's a photo of Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema of Arizona talking to each other. So 2 Democratic senators that have acted in ways that are antithetical to the cause of good governance and to the cause of passing the Democratic agenda of trying to actually help the American people, as opposed to the Republican agenda of blocking help for the American people, actively hurting the American people in the hope that they'll get so crazed, irrational, and disgruntled with politics in general that they'll keep voting for the anti-government party. Sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it's not. They're like, no, we know what we want to do with government. We want to obstruct it and thereby reduce your tax burden, and that will help you. And it might help people feel good initially, but then their children have crumbling schools to attend, and their roads are crumbling, and their bridges are crumbling, and their overall regulatory system is under-enforced and the IRS is underfunded. And so wealthy people get away with not paying any tax because there's nobody around to audit them and check and enforce compliance with the tax code. So only poor people and middle-class people are compelled to pay tax because... What's wrong, darlings? Why are you knocking on the door, sweetie? Just getting these knocks periodically. But Dad, what are you knocking? Please use your voice to tell me. Or stop knocking. They're driving this bear. My gosh. I'm not the only person in the house. All right. Oh, this is a good step. Senator Joe Manchin confirms he will meet personally with Texan reps to discuss voting legislation. So they essentially, through stepping up to the plate and saying, this is really critical. There's no going back from this. This is a turning point. This is a crossroads. The Republican-dominated Texan state legislature is going to make democracy unworkable in Texas. They're going to make it so difficult for minorities to vote. They're going to make it so difficult for people who don't work standard hours to vote, people who work night shifts, and therefore, just people who will struggle to get to the polling booths, who will want to do drive-by voting, or who will want to drink water whilst they wait in line to vote, because in minority communities, Republicans have so restricted the number of polling booths that overcrowding causes mass queues and that people have to wait for hours. Oh, Jane says, welcome to the US. Thank you for that preemptive welcome. I'm pleased. Yeah, so I'm very pleased that Manchin will meet personally with Texas Democrats. Apparently last time they requested a meeting, he sent his staff. So they met with Manchin's staff. And the Texas Democrats' message is likely to be, there's no bipartisanship in states where Republicans are pushing this, i.e. Republicans are the ones acting in a highly partisan way. And so federal arguments about bipartisanship on Capitol Hill to prevent federal action are disingenuous, and Democrats in the Senate should recognize that. Another emerging talking point first aired by Rep. Vesey and echoed by Turner. If Mitch McConnell did a filibuster carve-out for Amy Coney Barrett, then we ought to do a carve-out for the Black and brown people that live in Texas. And he says, yes, I know the SCOTUS carve-out was done for Gorsuch, not Barrett. Don't at me. All right. So the pressures on Joe Manchin are increasing, but we don't know how much pressure is on Joe Manchin from his powerful, wealthy donors. So he gets money from the US Chamber of Commerce, which is funded by Koch Millions, and yes, other very wealthy corporate executives contribute to the US Chamber of Commerce treasury. So one person here says, I bet that's because I very politely called Senator Manchin's staff in West Virginia yesterday and said, I live in Texas House District 134, and could the senator please meet with them? My civic involvement paid off. Well, we hope so. That's an important point because we know Brian lives in Texas. Brian, if you feel like calling Senator Manchin's staff, maybe that will also help. But someone says, this is a good point. I support Texas reps and hope they prod federal action on voting rights, but Manchin will likely nod nicely, pat them on the head, and then nod and wink back to McConnell on his way back to the office. Well, we've got to hope that doesn't happen. And how can we contribute to that pressure so that Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia feels compelled, just feels really put on the spot by these times? Pressure from Joe Biden, pressure from the public, pressure from corporations with a conscience, because some corporations have shown a willingness to speak out in defense of American voting integrity and to say it's not okay for Republicans to keep creating obstacles for voters, to make it fundamentally more difficult to vote, to encourage a drop-off of voting participation to make America's democracy less functional. Brian's going to do it on Wednesday. Fantastic. It's Wednesday for me, Brian, but I know it's Tuesday night for you. So that'll be awesome. Hooray for including action steps for people in our little community of decent people who care. All right. This is a good point. Someone says, I understand what they're going for, but calling Joe Manchin the most powerful senator is like calling a huge boulder on the highway the most powerful car. That's a good joke and a sad joke. Oh, wow. New analysis of campaign disclosures found 6 Democratic senators, Mark Kelly, Hassan, Manchin, Coombs, Sinema, and Tester, received a combined total of nearly $333,000 from lobbyists, PACs, and lobbying firms affiliated with Exxon over the past decade. So, yes, I still call the Republicans the most coal-corrupted party, but that's 6 Democrats taking a lot of collective funds from Exxon-affiliated super PACs as well. So anyway, I had better go and hang out with my kids on their holiday and not just leave it all up to their dad, my husband. So thank you, everybody, for being here today and listening to this broadcast. If you have the time and the space, maybe listen to President Joe Biden's speech about what a serious moment we live in. And perhaps we'll just listen to Representative Clyburn say that he's hopeful he can convince Joe Manchin that we ought to treat constitutional issues the same way we treat budget issues. All right.
Congressman Clyburn, I know that you are close with the President, and I know that you've said that you've spoken directly with Vice President Harris about this. I know you've also, over the course of this voting rights fight, spoken directly and done some work with Senator Joe Manchin, the centrist West Virginia senator who has been such a fulcrum on this point. The question of what he's willing to do and how he's willing to approach this has become potentially determinative in terms of whether or not the Democrats in the Senate are able to actually act. How open is the door that you are pushing on here? How much resistance is there to this idea? How strong are the arguments that are being made against the kind of reform that you're talking about?
Well, I have had extensive conversations with Joe Manchin. I like Joe Manchin. We've been friends for a long time. We used to do a lot of these kinds of shows together, just like I did with Joe Biden. So both of us have developed a great deal of patience with each other. And so I think that Joe has made me a little bit sensitive to the filibuster. I used to want to get rid of the whole thing. But he has convinced me that there's a place for extended debate on legislative issues. I am hopeful that I can convince him that we ought to treat constitutional issues the same way we treat budget issues. We move the budget forward without this filibuster application so as not to threaten the full faith and credit of the United States of America. And we ought to move forward on constitutional issues when it comes to the filibuster. So the filibuster, I think, has its place, but not when it comes to voting and other constitutional issues. So we'll see where we go from here. I am hopeful that Joe Manchin will do what I know that he's capable of doing, and that is the right thing.
Hearing you say that you are hopeful about that is going to change a lot of people's, I think, sense of despair on this issue. I think a lot of people very worried about democracy, very worried about voting rights, have felt like there's no that this is an impasse, that there's no way around. Hearing you talk about those conversations, hearing you express hope on this issue, hearing you be so specific in terms of what you'd like the president and vice president to do, it feels like a path. Thanks for helping us understand it tonight, Congressman. It's always an honor to have you here whenever you can be here.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was great. I'm glad I included that at the end of the program. Hi, Martian. Lovely to see you. And I am about to leave, but I'm still glad to see you in a live capacity. Hello, thanks for joining us. And so Maddo was indicating that a lot of the audience might be heartened to hear Rep. James Clyburn talk about his friendship or his relationship with Joe Manchin, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, and indicate that he thinks it's possible that he could convince Manchin of a carve-out, at least a temporary suspension of the filibuster, to protect constitutionally mandated rights to vote. Well, good luck. At least it reminds me that when I feel like we're hitting our head against a brick wall and that there's no way to directly appeal to Manchin, you can appeal to people in the circle close to Joe Manchin. So Brian taking time tomorrow to call Joe Manchin's staff in West Virginia to say, please listen to the message from Texas Democrats, if you've met with them yet or if you're still to meet with them, to listen to their message of the threat that voting rights are under, and the whole opening up to potentially swallow democracy that he can close if he's prepared to do the right thing here. And who else? And so that, yes, people like Representative James Clyburn and President Biden, those are people that can potentially influence Joe Manchin. We've got to pressure them. All right. And we should work out pressure campaigns for businesses so that businesses stop funding senators like Joe Manchin if they're going to assist Republicans in obstructing voters from being able to access their constitutionally mandated protected voting rights. Knowing that the Supreme Court is not useful in this case, that it's acted in bad faith to say, oh, well, you don't really need the Voting Rights Act. Surely everything's fine. People will find a way by hook or by crook. White people are more likely to be able to find a way. People who are statistically more likely to have essential jobs, to work irregular hours, to live in areas that are targeted for malpractice in terms of polling place distribution. So they're targeted for Republican voting deterrent methodologies that say, yep, you're only going to be serviced by an overcrowded polling place that's been calculated to put a polling tax, an illegal polling tax on your time by making you stand in line for 6 hours because we'll have too little resources for too many people. So thanks, Marsha, for the Super Heart Award. Take care, everybody. 6 days till I'm in the United States. And then I've realized probably some years more from that until I could become a permanent resident and ultimately a citizen. I've just started to realize how potentially long that's going to be unless I manage to start a company. There's apparently a pathway for Australian citizens if they can invest $1.8 million in starting a new business and prove that that's going to employ at least 10 people, then they can be on a fast track to citizenship. So it's a little bit unlikely, but you know what? Some of the most successful people dream big. So maybe I'll put that on my wish list, my vision board of things to do in the United States. Start a $1.8 million business that employs 10 people. I'm still planning to start an online magazine called The Call Out, because I feel like there's more avenue to make the news familiar, to mix it together with tips that relate to climate change and things that we can do as individuals, as well as things that we can do to build political consensus. Because our leaders mostly represent us when democracy is functional, but also our leaders have known that they're powerful allies, that wealthy people can also buy political opinions in the public through virtue of exposure campaigns and paid for advertisements that shape people's ideas and their understanding. Marsha says, sounds good, employ me. That's, you know what, that would be great. I could employ 10 people. that I've met through HAPS. I just need to generate an income stream. So to start a wildly popular news magazine, maybe we could start with volunteers and all have a section of like tips for gardening, tips for cheap eating, tips for a climate-friendly diet. So eating foods that require less intensive, I don't know, use of chemicals that are toxic to the bioweb. Tips for toes, yes, from our resident podiatrist. That's awesome idea, Marsha. I'll start talking about it every broadcast day of if anybody wants to contribute a column, because that's been one of my driving features as a broadcaster, hasn't it? It's always been to inspire everybody to recognize that this moment is historic. This is a crossroads for human existence. We have to stand up for democracy, to stand up for human capability to respond to challenges, to meet challenges, and solve problems for our collective well-being as well as our individual well-being. That we do have to shift the pendulum from individualism to cooperative work. And that even the Trump supporters, they've responded to some yearning for a mass movement. It's just misdirected energy, but the energy itself is good, to be part of something bigger. It's just trying to join a tribe of white supremacists is ultimately destructive, because the kind of people who pander to white supremacist ideas and white supremacist people are the kind of corrupt people who will validate your wrong ideas in order to exploit you, grift off the basis of the passionate, intense loyalty that is a function of validating your terrible inherited racist ideas. When I say you, I'm not speaking to the public, I'm speaking to Trump supporters whose brains have been marinated in foxaganda for just too long, and the exposure effect of those accumulated mistruths and that accumulated unjustifiable negativity towards migrants, Black people, teachers, unions, young people who are gender curious and sexual preference curious, all of that hostility and resentment, often intergenerationally based, but also often just a misdirected answer to the question of why are we suffering? Why is manufacturing suffering in the United States? Trump gave them answers, and they were simplistic and they were wrong. And he was stealing from democratic political platforms to say, yes, we care about workers and the kind of people who join unions in order to improve their lot in life. Trump did that. He built a larger electoral coalition than he should have been able to, because he was inadequately challenged on the fact that he was running as a semi-democrat. People just went, okay, that's what he's doing. The media needed to look more into his history of work practices. Does he repeatedly stiff contractors? Yes, he does. Oh, he's full of hot air promises and should have been called out more clearly on his habitual lying and misrepresentations, so that his claims to be running as a populist, as a Democrat-style populist, as well as a Republican-style migration opponent, that should have been on the table for everyone. A lot of things should have happened that didn't. Bernie supporters shouldn't have been so susceptible to Russian disinformation campaigns that said, Hillary stole from you, she stole your candidate's success from you, you'll have to punish her by not voting for her. Doesn't matter, Trump's not going to get in anyway. Make sure Hillary knows you hate her. Thanks, everybody. Take care, all the best, and talk to you soon. Bye. By Marsha, Molly, and Brian. Anybody else? Oh, Kim. Can't forget Kim. By Marsha, Molly, Brian, Kim, and Jane. Thank you to everybody for your attention, your time, your Super Heart Awards. Thank you so much. Take care and talk soon. Oh, also, and thank you to all the Patreons who have stuck with me through this broadcasting journey of 3 years, and I hope it continues. hopefully you can continue to chat in the comments with each other, bond, etc., even when I've gone. I hope so. Bye.